Great. Thanks for starting the recording, DeAndrea. So I'm Georgie Nickram. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Technical Assistance and Capacity Building Program Manager for the Best Starts for Kids initiative here at King County. So I am so honored to introduce DeAndrea Levias. She's the owner of Total Accounting and Tax and the principal consultant with Optimum Nonprofit Consulting. And they are a Best Starts capacity building organization. DeAndrea's work is focused on assisting community-based organizations to strengthen their fiscal and human resource systems so they can flourish. DeAndrea is passionate about helping nonprofits and community-based organizations analyze their current fiscal picture and establish plans that they're motivated to stick with so that they can achieve their financial goals. So welcome, DeAndrea. I will turn it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you, Georgie. Give me just a second. As Georgie said, I am one of the organizations that is providing accounting capacity building. In addition, my organization provides capacity building in the areas of human resources, marketing and communication, as well as racial and social justice work. And then we also have a team member that's helping on the front end with technical assistance. I have been working with nonprofits almost exclusively for about 10 years, and it's been really wonderful having this opportunity to work with the Best Starts for Kids grantees, because it's given me a chance to really get to know and learn about some organizations that I was not familiar with, although I've been in the South King County area for the better part of 17 years. Just a lot of wonderful old established as well as new organizations that are doing great work in the community. So I've been really excited to be able to work with them. So we are going to get started. The first part of our presentation. So some of you may have been with us last week, last week we did part 2 of this. And it was really more around internal control, segregation of duties, things that organizations can and should do to safeguard not only their financial information, but just money in general. So kind of having checks and balances in place so that the organization's assets are protected. This week, we're going to look more at how to track budget versus actual. So most of the BSK funding has a requirement that reports be done either monthly or quarterly to show actual spending. And then with those reports, some of them require backup documentation. So we're going to kind of walk through those pieces as well as how to do cost allocations. The first piece that we're going to start with is just how to track budget versus actual. And there's 2 to do this, either through Excel spreadsheets or through accounting software. In the pre-course survey, most of the organizations indicated that they use QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, or Excel to track their organization finances. So I'm kind of going to focus on those. If you use a different software and you have a question, then we can address that. But we will start with the accounting software. In QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, you have the ability to enter a budget. You can enter the budget by year. You can enter it by month, and then it totals for the year. And you also have the option to enter it by class if you have that feature turned on in the software. And what that allows you to do is, oh, hold on a second. I'm going to share another document. What that allows you to do in QuickBooks is create this P&L budget report. And so for any given time period, you can pull up your actual. This first column is your actual, then it shows you what was budgeted. Over here to the left, I kind of have it blocked out, is account names and numbers and all of that. And you can turn it on to show how much over or under budget you are and what percentage of your budget you use for that month. And then it also gives you year-to-date information. And now the cool thing about this is you can filter this report and run it organization-wide, or if your settings are set up, you can run it by class. So if you have different programs and as you're entering your financial data, you're assigning a class to all the transactions, you can filter this report and run it for one program or two programs. And then you can use that information to do your BSK reports. You can also drill down on these numbers in the software and produce the general ledger or the ledger detail that is required for some of the programs as well. Another option is if you don't upload your budget into an accounting software to be able to track it that way, is just simply to do an Excel spreadsheet. So this is most of the BSK grants have specific categories that costs are assigned to. So you just start the beginning of the year with whatever your annual budget is. And then each month as you go along, you enter your actual. And this one is just set up to record and show a running balance over here. So if you're over budget, under budget and categories, then you have time to make adjustments and move money around if your grant allows for that, or to stop spending in that category if that is the if that's the thing that you need to do. Are any of you currently using the budget tracking feature in QuickBooks, either online or desktop? And if so, what has been your experience with it?
So this is Sherry from Open Doors for Multicultural Families. Yes, we use this for all our programs. I think the one thing that I have not figured out is when you mentioned you can do the budget as a whole, some of our contracts, have different fiscal years. And so when I'm doing the budget for the whole organization, the numbers are really quirky because it's taking the current year numbers, and some of our contracts, maybe the budget numbers are back in the last year. I only enter an annual budget versus a monthly. And so it's kind of been not good results. I've kind of had to manually do the whole organization versus the individual programs.
Yeah, that is a challenge. I actually think even if you entered it monthly, you can't do the budget to actual across years. It's really that part of it is really weird, which is I think why a lot of the organizations just do it outside of the system in an Excel format. So just take the actuals out of the software system and then drop it into an Excel spreadsheet. But you're right, that is one of the limitations when your programs cross years, which is the case for a lot of these. Some of the enterprise software, like I think MIP and Sage, I think they have that capability, but I mean, those programs are a lot more pricey than the QuickBooks is. So that's something to be mindful of also. Sorry, I always get stuck here, you guys. There we go. Is anybody doing all of their tracking in Excel spreadsheets? Is anybody doing them in Excel and wanting to move to to doing it in their accounting software and they're just not sure how to set it up?
Hi, this is Kathy Brooks. That's like exactly where we're at. We've been tracking in Excel, but challenges with that are then you have to do more manual entry, and then there's always room for error, and we're like cross-checking between systems, so it's always a little bit duplicative. So hoping to move to putting budgets into our QuickBooks system more specifically by class to make that easier. But we've similarly had challenges where you're trying to look at multiple grants at a time, and then the timing is off, and you really just have to pay attention to like which report you're pulling up by class to get the right information. So it'll be an interesting learning experience.
So which QuickBooks are you guys using? Is it online or desktop?
That's a great question. I am our grants director and I work very closely with the finance team, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, because they have very similar functionality, but there is some stuff that you can do in desktop that you can't do in online. Although they're trying to get caught up, but it's just not quite there yet. Does anybody have any questions on the tracking budget versus actual? So in my worksheet that I shared, that I'm actually going to pull up again, this one that I did the annual amount and then the month, you can always set this up. That's just not how this one is. Instead of it just being an annual budget that you track on a rolling basis, you could always kind of make it look like the other one where it's where you break your budget out by month and then you post the actual and do this over under. I mean, you could do the same thing in this worksheet. It's just a lot more manual work, and most organizations don't want to do all that. They just need a general idea of where they are with spending. And so just seeing the numbers change month by month is enough for them. Any questions? Yes.
I think you mentioned before that you could track it just overall. So how, I guess, how important is it to stay within the line items? For example, if salary went over, are you able to utilize some of the operating costs that maybe you were underutilizing?
It really depends on your contract.
Okay.
There are some where you can move money between lines as long as it's not more than a 10% change.
Okay.
Then there's some you can move money, but if it's over 10%, you have to get approval from the program manager or whoever. And then, I mean, there's some that as long as you're within budget, it doesn't, you can have fluctuations between lines.
Okay.
So it really, that's one of the interesting things about these, the different grants. They kind of all work a little differently. And so it's just working with your program manager or whoever approves your invoices or does your payments to understand what is and isn't allowed. Because I mean, these are guesstimates. I mean, they're best case, we try to get them as close and as accurate as we can, but things happen. So sometimes you are off on line items, but you just need to understand again how your grant works to know what you can and can't do as far as moving money between line items.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Any other questions on this? So we went through the examples. Our next thing that we are going to talk about is cost allocation methods. So how do you even assign costs? So you have your budget in place, you have a methodology or framework in place to track the budget versus actual. So how do you determine what goes onto line items for your actual? And in this, you have two types of costs. You have direct costs, which are those things that are clearly and directly related to a specific program or grant funding source. Things like supplies, materials, staff salaries, consulting fees, if you can give stipends to participants or gift cards, things like that. If you have flexible funding that you can spend, those costs are usually direct costs to a specific program or funding source. Indirect costs are things usually thought of as overhead costs. They are costs that the organization incurs as a cost of doing business that sometimes can be allocated to program funding. So things like rent. So rent could be a direct cost or an indirect cost. If you're renting a space specific to a program or specific for a certain amount of staff, that could be a direct cost. And I see that some of the organizations with the pandemic or whatever, they went to the shared co-working spaces. So they rented small 2 or 3 person offices that only one program uses. So that would be a direct cost. But if the organization had a big office that all of their programs used, then that cost would need to be spread across the different programs based on a number of different factors. Things like IT, accounting, any of your admin type work generally are indirect costs. Your executive director's salary could be a combination of both. If your organization is still at the point where your executive director is actually providing services and performing work, that portion would be a direct cost. And then they're kind of managing, running the organization, that would be an indirect cost. It would then need to be allocated to different programs or funding sources. There are a number of different ways that you can allocate costs. One is payroll and personnel. So the number of FTEs or hours worked within a department or fund. If you have an employee that just works on one program, one funding source, 100% of their FTE goes to that program, then it's really easy and straightforward. But if you have an employee that say they work on one program, but there's 2 different funding sources, so their time needs to be split. There's 2 or 3 funding sources, so their time needs to be split across those funding sources. Then you'd have to establish a method to allocate their time. And it can be done one of 2 ways. When you establish your budget, you in the for the funds, and say if one program was funding 30% of the salary, one program was 50 and another was 20. So that's 3 different funding sources, but it totals 100%. Or say it's just 30 and 50 and the other 20% isn't covered by direct funding, it would just be considered admin or gen ops. Then you have to, whenever you record that person's payroll, you have to do that that allocation in the system. Not so much done around accounts payable. So again, if you are paying for consultants or buying supplies and things for the office that are going to be shared, then you have to find a way to determine how you spread that across programs. It could be as simple as we're just going to spread it evenly across however many programs we have plus admin. Or if you have more employees, so say you have 10 employees, 3 in one program, 2 in another, and then everybody else is admin, you could do that allocation based on the number of employees that the organization has in each of the programs or departments. The thing is to one of two things, either establish it at the time that you do your annual budget and use that allocation for the whole year, or, and I've seen this done, you would literally have to have everybody track their time against projects for every pay period, which is a thing. There are a lot of payroll systems that do that. Again, MIP, Financial Edge, they're larger enterprise accounting software that whenever payroll is run, everybody enters their time to specific programs. Payroll is run, the month is closed, and then there's this allocation that happens based on the actual hours that people worked for that month to each program. So with that, your numbers change every month. When you just go with a number that's established when you do your budget, then as long as everybody's, say, salaries are the same or rent is the same or whatever, your allocation is the same every month. But when you use the method where you're tracking time by pay period, then your numbers are subject to change month to month, which isn't a bad thing. It's probably a more accurate accounting of things, but for a lot of organizations, it's a lot and it's not necessary. The thing is to make a determination of how the allocation is going to be done, document it, follow it, and then review it on at least maybe an annual basis is the thing, and make sure that it's being applied consistently across the board. We have any questions on that, the different ways that you can allocate costs? Then everybody can unmute themselves, right? I didn't mute everybody by accident. Let's see. We have a question. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Amy. So you guys do it the latter. You guys do it by pay period. Yeah, that's awesome. A lot of the larger organizations have the ability to do that. So Sharman has a question. Can you please explain how the percentage of time or hours for executive staff spread across programs is determined, not just budgeted, but an allocation method determined and documented? Like a quarterly time study. Yeah, something like that could be used. Again, it would require the executive director to actually track and monitor their time, but it could be done. A simpler, easier method might just be to allocate their time evenly. Well, you would think that the majority of their time would be kind of organization level work. So if maybe 50% of their time was dedicated to admin, and then the other 50% might be spread across programs, because although they're the ED, they are responsible for managing the program coordinators, directors, or, you know, people at different levels of the organization. So all of their time shouldn't be admin, but I venture to say that, again, unless they are an ED who is providing services, the vast majority of their time would be admin or gen ops time versus program time. But you do want to allocate some of their salary to programming. Can you talk about the indirect cost rate as part of an allocation method? Kershaw, are you talking about the federal indirect cost or just indirect cost in general? Because there's a couple of different things. Most of the VSK grants give anywhere from 10 to 12% kind of as a base. indirect costs, but then there's also the indirect cost determination that you can get from the IRS.
Just the amount that's you guys allocate and how we can utilize that. It's something that's come up as a question for us a number of times.
So again, depending on what's allowed in your grant or what you entered in your grant budget. So I see some sometimes because budgets are so tight, organizations don't include rent in their actual budget. It's allowed, but they don't put a line item for rent as their actual budget. They just say it'll be covered within that 10% or 12% of the admin costs that they end up getting. So again, you say you have $100,000 budget and you're only getting 10,000, 10% is $10,000 for admin. You have to take a look at kind of what your overall organization indirect or admin costs are and see what you can actually cover with that $10,000. And then look at one of these allocation methods. And when you do your entries each month, actually do the allocation to assign or enter the cost, that 10% of cost for the month, if that makes sense. I'm sorry.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
So this is Sharma said they're often based on FTE or square footage. It depends. I mean, there's no set. I mean, it has to make sense. Like rent might make sense on square footage. So say you have a building, an office with multiple offices. So, I mean, if you had the information, you could say this program uses this much of the square footage, this program uses that much of the square footage, and then there's this common space, this admin. So for things like rent, building maintenance, things like that, it makes sense to use a square footage allocation. But when you're talking about, payrolls or salaries, it makes more sense to use an FTE. So it just depends on what the cost is that you're actually trying to allocate, would help determine which method you use. Let's see. Back in the questions, Amy says, yeah, they do a monthly time study. She uses a calendar for documentation. Sharman asking, the BSK program requires grantees to have a documented allocation plan with methodology explained. Yeah, I mean, most grant funders, if you are allocating funds to their, I guess, grant or funding source, they want to know how you came up with that method, and they want it to be documented. It's also one of the things that when you get to the point where your organization is being audited, it's one of the things that the auditors will look at, because again, they're looking at the policies and procedures that you have in place and testing to see that you're actually following them. So if you have a documented allocation process or method, then you need to make sure that you're following it, or otherwise it would be an audit finding. I mean, probably nothing major, but it would be a departure from procedure, which would make it an audit finding. And so we are going to look at an example of some allocations. This one is a personnel allocation. So for an organization that has 6 different programs or funding sources, whichever, and then Gen Ops. So they do theirs on an annual basis based on the budget, positions down the side, and then the amount that's allocated to each funding source, making sure that it's 100%. And then each month, payroll and benefit information is entered into this spreadsheet and calculated. And then these numbers are used for the journal entry that is entered into their accounting software. So in this case, their payroll program doesn't have the ability to do this calculation or this breakout. So it's done manually each month at month end, and then just entered as a journal entry. So for the payroll, for health insurance, for the employer paid portion of health insurance, the 401k and life insurance. So, I mean, nothing super, super fancy or technical. It's just, again, something that's set up at the beginning of the year. And then this journal entry is made monthly at the end of the month. Are there any questions on this? Thoughts, feedback?
I have one quick question.
Yes.
So if you're like, for instance, Double Dutch Divas, and I'm doing all of the admin work at home, I don't have a way to do it any other place. Can you add some of your rent expenses to that if you're doing all of your documentation, your paperwork? It's a lot of paperwork. But if I'm not renting a building to do it and I'm just doing it at home, can you put some of your expenses, probably not the whole thing, but a percentage of it?
I would say no. I mean, the thing that you might look at and might consider, it would require board approval, is some type of reimbursement or accountability plan. Since you are using your home as an office, I mean, you can't put your, I guess, quote unquote, personal expenses on there. But if your board approves some type of reimbursement or allotment for the fact that you're running the organization out of your home, then that could be included or looked at.
Okay.
But again, it would need to be documented, through board minutes with board approval and yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jennifer. I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yes. So question on that, because wouldn't like writing off part of the rent, if we're doing, accounting and at home, require us to come up with a specific percentage of the space that we're using for work?
Oh, it's not, it's something, again, that would have to be looked at, evaluated, and documented. It's just not, my rent is $1,000. I want to be reimbursed $750 or whatever. Whatever decision is made needs to be evaluated and it needs to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, so let's take out the fact that you're the executive director or whatever. During the pandemic, a lot of everybody was working from home. So a lot of organizations gave their employees tech stipends. They got approved from the board where they were giving their employees monthly stipends for internet and the fact that they were working from home. So it would be something similar to that. It doesn't have to be an exorbitant amount, or probably wouldn't be an exorbitant amount, but it needs to be discussed and approved by the board and documented.
I
But it
see.
would be
Just like
something similar.
They just have to determine what that amount is gonna be.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. Anybody else? And then the other one, so just an example of rent. Again, you can just decide this example, so rent is 2,500. We're just gonna spread it evenly across the programs and G and ops. So when you do your monthly invoice for rent, you enter it and allocate a portion of it to each of the programs. So things like IT, you could do the same, you could do it evenly across. One of the other options is to do it based on the number of computers or number of people in each program. So in this instance, I just did, there's 12 employees, 3 in this program, 1 in this one, 4 in this one. So you just take the 1,755 monthly amount and do the allocation across programs, make sure that it totals, the 1,755 at the end, and this would be your monthly journal entry. So there's lots of different ways to do it. The thing is to determine how your organization wants to do it, then document it, and then follow it. Let's see, something in the chat. Yeah, Sherry asks, has anyone found a payroll service that allocates time similar to this spreadsheet without having to manually enter the numbers? Yeah, it's pretty pricey. Like I say, the payroll function in Financial Edge will do this, but that software is $10,000 to $15,000. It's not cheap. I think one of the MIP programs will do it as well. But for a lot of organizations, it's not cost effective yet for them to invest in that type of software. So you find yourself having to do this manual work, unfortunately. QuickBooks T-sheets. Presha, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. We just recently started using it. We've always used QuickBooks Payroll, which does allow us to track our employees' time by class because we use QuickBooks Desktop. And then T-Sheets is a timesheet program that goes along with it. And so you can also allocate by class. And so they do their timesheets, and then you import that data from T-Sheets into QuickBooks, and then it runs the payroll and then you have timesheets and everything, and it's all classed the same. And that works out really well for us.
Okay.
That's how we keep track of all of our different programs and finances, is by classing everything.
And are you using QuickBooks payroll, desktop payroll, or online payroll?
Desktop payroll.
Desktop payroll.
Through
Okay.
QuickBooks Enterprise.
I have a follow-up
Oh, and you
question
have
to
the
that.
enterprise. Okay, you have the enterprise version. Okay.
Yeah, we just upgraded to that because it was actually cheaper than QuickBooks Desktop. Because it integrated the payroll costs into the cost of the payroll software, because they were raising the prices of their QuickBooks payroll.
Right. Okay. Someone had a follow-up question?
Right. So you said, okay, so QuickBooks, what did you call it? Enterprise?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the enterprise edition.
Okay. And then my question is for allocating your staff across the fundings, it's like for this example, if there's 6 funders, are you able to do that as an administrator, as payroll person, or does the staff member have to choose which program they're working in?
Oh, yeah, you can go ahead, Christian.
Essentially, we basically tell them what their allocations need to be based on budgets. Because all of our staff is salaried. So they do their timesheets and they class it appropriately. And if it's not classed appropriately, I have the program manager send the timesheet back to them to fix it and make sure that it's correct. And then once it imports into QuickBooks payroll, then it's classed appropriately.
Okay, but you're not, as an administrator, able to change it yourself.
Oh, I can, but I choose
Okay,
not to because I want my staff to be accountable for what they're
right.
doing.
Yeah, okay.
But
Thank
as
you.
an administrator, yes, I have full access to be able to do anything, send the finance director. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any other questions? Comments? Let's see. Do that. So the last part is having sufficient and appropriate supporting documentation. So now you have your budget, you're entering transactions, you're tracking against actuals, you have your allocation methods down. Now it is time to submit monthly documentation, or it's time for your fiscal review where they're going to be requesting samples of documentation. And so we just want to talk about what some of that looks like. So time and effort documentation. So making sure that you have offer letters for any new hires that come into the organization for this particular program. Usually you want it to say the position, whether they're exempt, the position title, the salary, whether they're exempt or non-exempt, and they should have signed off on it. Timesheets, whether electronic or physical, or whether electronic or physical, need to, show time and have an approval from a supervisor or a manager prior to payroll processing. So like Kershaw was saying, in their automated system or in their payroll system, employees enter time, but then program managers have to approve it before it goes to final processing. So even with the manual system, you want to have a manager or someone approve timesheets before they get processed for payroll. Most organizations now are doing direct deposit, but if you are an organization that is still doing paper checks, then you want to make sure that you have a way to access direct deposit information or pay stub information in case that data or backup is requested. Usually just doing the fiscal audit. Normally on the month what I found with the monthly invoices is they just want a payroll summary report. They don't necessarily want the pay stubs and direct deposit information for employees, although they do want it for contractors. So again, some of this depends on what your funding source was and what your what documentation is required at what point. Some of this is required every month for some of the programs that I work with, and some of it's only required during a fiscal audit when they are sampling transactions. job and wage changes. So if you have a person in the organization that gets a raise or they go from one position to another, you want to do a new offer letter that documents that change when it happens. And then we're back to the allocation methodology. So if you are allocating time across programs or funding sources, how did you determine, you know, that methodology? And then they want to make sure that you're actually using it. Are there any questions on the time and effort documentation? Have any of you already gone through fiscal audits, or do you have to submit this stuff monthly for your program that you're funded for?
For us, it varies by contract.
Yeah.
So some of them require, you know, a monthly general ledger, quarterly, usually the budget to actuals. We have gone through a couple of we call them monitoring visits, but so we've done a couple of those, and they're really, I don't know, the feeling I get is they're there to help you. They're not there to find, you know, nitpick you and find all the errors. They're here to kind of what this training today is about. They just
Exactly.
you aware what you need to be doing, and if you aren't, then they're gonna, you know, figure out a way to make sure that you're giving them whatever documentation is needed. So not too scary. Sometimes it's a little bit of work pulling the data that they're requesting, but it's not as bad as our annual audit that we do with a CPA firm.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that audit is just to help make sure that you are meeting contract compliance, because there is language in all of the contracts around what's required for financial record keeping and tracking. So those audits are just to make sure that organizations are on track, and if they're not, then, you know, recommendations are made, and the expectation is that by the next time those things will be resolved and you'll be on track. So yeah, and it's a lot less strenuous than an actual audit for sure.
I would definitely agree the audit can be a little bit stressful, but as Sherry mentioned, it actually helps our organization be accountable for our graph, and also to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And the great thing about the audit team is that they're able to guide us if there's anything that we're missing. So it eases us into it. But like I said, it really holds us accountable and making sure that we're allocating the money correctly and we have all the necessary and required documents that are needed.
Absolutely. Sharman posted a message: if budgeted time estimated is not close to time actually being worked, then you might need a budget revision. Yeah, and that's kind of what we talked about a little earlier when the person asked if you can move money between line items. And again, it really depends on your funder and what they allow. There are some instances, I can't think of exactly what program it is, and it might not actually be a BSK program, but they don't allow any budget changes. So if your numbers are off, figure it out outside grant. They don't allow you to move money between line items, and you can't go over. So again, that's why it's really important that you understand what you can and can't do with your funding. You know, if you can make a change, does it require an approval above a certain amount, and all of that. So things you can ask. Can all this information be documented in Salesforce? Use dashboard to track everything. I am not very familiar with Salesforce. I hear about it. I know a lot of agencies use it. To be honest, don't know the full capability of it. I don't know if there's someone else on here that might be able to answer that? Maybe you use it in your organization.
Yeah, we do use Salesforce to keep track of the funding that we provide or allocate to our families. So sometimes, depending on the contract that we have, we're able to provide financial relief to our families. Like last time we talked about gift card. That's another tool we use to maintain the necessary documents that families are signing and our managers are signing. And then also we keep track of how much they are receiving within the year. And we're able to pull that information for our reporting when it's necessary.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good. Did that answer your question?
I think I
wanna
would
say
add
the name
something
wrong.
here, because that question comes from someone on our team.
Okay.
Meow Meow, I think
Yeah.
what you're asking is, all of these spreadsheets and the budget tracking, is this something that can be kept in Salesforce? My sense is no. Salesforce is more of a database where, yeah, we can track what monies we distribute out to youth and families. But the types of spreadsheets that we use to track the budget and the actuals, I think are much bigger than what Salesforce does. However, we could of course put those spreadsheets up there as documentation and as a way to keep track of the artifacts that we submit for reporting.
Awesome. Any more questions on the time and effort documentation?
DeAndrea, I had a question a while back from a really small organization. Do you have any best practice tips about how, if they're a small organization, how the executive director should document their timesheet or get their timesheet signed? What's the proper way for that executive director? If they, let's say they're one of only, let's say they're the sole paid staff member or one of only two.
I mean, so usually that's a salaried position. So just having board approval for whatever their annual salary is going to be, and then making sure that that's what gets processed into the payroll system. Normally at the executive director level, they aren't really doing timesheets that are like allocating their time to different programs and stuff. They may do a time study for a while, like one of the a couple of the participants put in the chat, but normally an executive director wouldn't need like a timesheet signed off on for every pay period or anything, as long as their annual salary and any increases that may happen throughout the year were documented by the board. I mean, I guess if an organization did want something like that, then they'd have to get one of their board members involved, maybe a treasurer or someone that approved their pay every pay period. But I have yet to come across anything like that with all of the organizations that I work for. As long as there's board approval and documentation of what their salary is, then that's just what gets processed. And as a check, I think we talked about last time in that instance, maybe payroll register or payroll summary goes to a board member after payroll is run, just as an additional check to make sure that, what they're supposed to be paid is what's actually being paid.
Right. I think also that does definitely help answer that question. I guess what I also meant was like paychecks. If the executive director is the one who signs paychecks, they can't sign their own paycheck, right? So in those instances, what do you recommend a small organization would do?
That's interesting. I have not actually
Sorry to spring
come
that on you.
across that. No. I mean, because most organizations are using direct deposit. I mean, they would obviously have to have someone else sign it, or again. So we have an organization, again, through the pandemic, checks over a certain amount required dual signature, but everybody was working from home. And so what they did was they provided a spreadsheet of all of the checks electronically and got approval that way. So it kind of waived the actual double signature on the checks. They use the email approval kind of as that separate signature, because it wasn't a bank requirement, it was just their internal requirement. So I mean, I guess either have someone else sign the check, which depending on, you know, proximity, a board member, I guess even if there was another staff member that had signing authority on the check, to have someone else sign it, or to get some type of email or written approval for them to be able to sign their own check. I mean, again, there's no rule at the bank or anything that a person can't sign their own check. It's definitely not a good practice. So you want to have somebody else involved in that process. But I have not come across that, because most of all of my agencies, they process payroll through direct deposit.
That is super helpful. Thank you, DeAndrea. I
Thank
see
you.
a note in the chat too that
Uh-oh.
says the board treasurer or board president could sign them. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
So it just, again, goes to the dynamic of the organization and where the board chair, board president are, and how easy it is for them to be able to get to and sign checks on a regular basis. It's a process that would have to be set up and maintained. The other piece, so documentation, cash disbursement. So again, we're making payments to vendors, we're ordering things online, we're going to the store and purchasing office supplies or program supplies, all of those things. So the types of documentation that you want to have, definitely receipts. So whether it's I went to the store and I got a printed receipt, I went to the store and got an emailed receipt, you know, taking that receipt and storing it somewhere. I will say the paper receipts that they print out, it's a good idea a lot of times to make a copy of it and maybe get it stored digitally, because after a while, some of those receipts fade and you can't even see or tell what's on it. It's horrible, because people are like, here, I got this receipt, and it's like, oh, wow, I can't see what this thing says. So there are a lot of, there are programs, again, with QuickBooks, they have a feature now where with the mobile app with your phone, you can take a picture and upload a copy of the receipt into the system. If you're paying contractors or outside vendors, you want to always make sure that you have an invoice for them. If you are paying via check, most banks don't send canceled checks anymore with the bank statement. Some do, they send a picture, but a lot of banks don't send canceled checks anymore. But at least you could have the bank statement that showed the check was cleared in the number and the amount. For electronic payments, wherever you process them through, you usually get some type of confirmation report or receipt. And then credit card statements. The thing with, credit card statements, you still want to have the receipt for whatever the original transaction was. A credit card statement or a bank statement by itself isn't necessarily enough detail or backup. You still want to have a receipt with it. And the thing about this, talk about, I guess, how to store and file these. My suggestion is one of two ways, either by year and month, alphabetically, have some type of a naming convention so that when you have to go and pull this documentation, especially if you're saving it electronically, that it's easy to do. So year and month by vendor, so by alphabetical, or you can save them year and month by program. So say you have a early learning program that you create a folder for the year and each month, and all of your receipts for that month go into that folder. So that if it's fiscal year, you send your ledger and they're like, well, send me the backup for this transaction for this month. It's easy to just go to that program folder and pull it out. Or again, if you do the month, the year and month, it's still, if you have a proper naming convention in place, easy to go and retrieve that documentation and send it in. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? What are you guys doing currently? How are you storing your receipts and cash disbursement documentation? Is it electronic, or are you guys still keeping paper files? Or a combination of both?
Both, yeah. Because it's an ongoing conversation about how best to do it. And our admin person had been doing all paper copy because some of our information is sensitive. So we get, personal information, identifying clients should not be whisking around through the internet and stuff.
Absolutely.
So it's been a very paper-based process. But we also, for groceries for youth group or my collaborative cooking project, I have the paper copy, we keep that, and then we scan it. And so there is a digital trail that's happening and a file. So we're still trying to figure out the best way to do that and maintain appropriate confidentiality where needed.
Yeah. I mean, that's always, I guess, depending on what your file storage system is, then definitely having folders that can be locked and everybody can access is important. But again, making sure that there's processes in place to make sure that somebody doesn't accidentally get added or get access that they shouldn't have access to.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Kamoli says they use Smartsheet for the entire accounts payable procedures workflow, including manual approvals and saving the documents. Is that I'm assuming that's some type of payment processing software? I'm not familiar with that one. That's a new one. Are you able to come on mic about?
Hi, yes. So Smartsheet is not necessarily accounting software. You can use for project management. Basically, the software itself was created for project management, but we utilize some functions so that you can create a form. And then each employee who needs staff need to submit the bills to accounting department. They can use the Smartsheet form to fill out all information, including GL accounts, and then attaching the bills from vendors. And once it's submitted, the workflow function allow you to bring the form to that approval directory. So approver receive the form, review the invoice, and approve, and then it will prompt to account payable person to enter the information in a QuickBooks. But the great thing about it is like we don't have to exchange email about it. And then second, it's like approval process is very clear. So our auditor actually likes it. Like approve it. And then also, everybody need to attach that the invoices. So you don't need to file. Because like account payable, like my position, we can go back to the spreadsheet version of like a form function to find that whatever we need to find. So the pooling invoice is extremely easy than just saving in that the digital file in your file explorer in a Microsoft software or in a cabinet, actual paper bills in a cabinet in the office.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a part of the process that we talked about last week, kind of the internal control, segregation of duties and getting approval. So it's just sounds like an automated workflow that's always nice. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Let's see, someone asked, how long should you keep receipts? My standard answer is going to be 7 years. The PowerPoint last week actually had a time schedule based on what the document was. Some of the BSK contracts actually have language in them to say how long you have to, maybe it's not BSK, those may be state contracts that say how long after a contract ends that you have to keep documentation in case they have to come back and audit for some reason. But a good rule of thumb for financial data is at least 7 years. Let's see here. We have, looks like that is it. Do we have any questions or comments about, I guess, anything that we covered today? Anybody want to share anything else? So kind of as Georgie started stop sharing this, the presentation that because all of you have BSK funding, you are eligible for capacity building, whether it be from my organization or any of the other organizations that are contracted. So if you are in a space where you are using Excel and you want to try to figure out how to get more of this into your accounting software, or if your payroll system doesn't allow you to do the breakout and allocation the way you need to, and you want some assistance setting it up outside of the system, then reach out to Georgie and she can connect you with an organization that can help you through that transition or help you figure out what the best route to go is. Any more questions? If not, we can wrap early. I'm not sure.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Tan Kirkpatrick, and I'm the executive director of VFAB, which is a program under Hope Central. And one of my questions, like in terms of, you had mentioned the capacity support, we're very new in doing this work, especially around the financial, piece and documentation, all that. What in terms of and maybe this is a question for Jory as well, like what type of capacity support would, like for us, I think we need help with kind of learning how to do this whole process, since this is and being able to track it. And we're beginning with the Excel, and we interface with QuickBooks and Zoho. And so this might be a conversation piece for getting some support in kind of developing it for a long-term goal of management.
Yeah, all, as I put in the chat just now, all BSK funded partners can get capacity building help. And we have a few great finance capacity builders like DeAndrea. DeAndrea is one of the people you might get matched with. And so you could email me and we could talk a little bit more about exactly what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Well, if there are no other questions, Georgie, do you have anything before we get off?
No, so we will be getting the recording together. It might take us a couple days to edit it and get it ready for you, but then we're going to be sending that on to you, and we'll also attach some resources that DeAndrea has talked about today. So we hope that's all helpful. And if you have any other questions or other resources, you could always reach out to me and say, hey, does DeAndrea have this other template? And I could pass that message on to her, and there might be other things that we could share with you later on. So thank you very, very much, all of you, for being here. And I hope it was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
DeAndre. Very
Bye, everybody.
useful. Bye.
Let's see, we have let's see. I think we will do not too large of a group, but just for the sake of time so we can get going. I kind of want to do an icebreaker, but we'll break out in small groups of about 6. And we're just going to do name, organization. And if you had a superpower, what would it be? Just something fun to get us started and get to know about some of the other organizations. So give me just a second to set this up. Open all rooms.
Tiendra, I came out from the room by mistake.
Uh-oh, let's see.
I hit the wrong. I
Let
think room
me,
1. I think it was room 1.
hold on, let me find you. Carolyn. Oh, that's weird. Room 1 is gone. It won't let me. I'm just gonna put you in one of the other rooms.
Okay.
Sorry. Did that work? Oh, so it looks like some of you did it not move you to your breakout rooms?
No, we're still waiting.
Uh-oh. Let's see. I think there's something that you might have to do on oh, nope, it says unassigned. I'm sorry. Hold on.
It's my fault at least on my end, because I joined in late.
Oh, that's okay. So we're just doing introductions and breakout rooms. I'll move you now.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Hello, for those of you that are coming in, we're in breakout rooms doing introductions. So I will move you guys to a room. Hello, for everyone coming in, we're just in breakout rooms doing introductions. We probably have about 5 more minutes. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, it's just name, organization, and if you had a superpower, what would your superpower be? Is the icebreaker we're doing.
Hi, DeAndrea.
Hi, Bonnie.
Yeah, I'm more of a sort of a viewer, but yes, I'll introduce myself to you and Adelia. I'm Bonnie Flukinger. I'm a business finance officer with Best Starts for Kids. So I'm with the King County DCHS, and if I had a superpower, I would love to fly. That would be my superpower, although I'm afraid of heights, but I think if I was flying, I wouldn't have to be worried about falling.
Exactly. That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, looks like we got people coming back. Awesome. Awesome. Do this. I am still learning to work this technology, so bear with me. I just gave everybody kind of a 2-minute warning. I see some of you guys are coming back in. Any interesting superpower requests revealed? Bonnie and I was just talking, and hers is to be able to fly, which I think is super cool.
We had some good ones in our room. Morphing into animals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I like that one.
In another group, and someone said being able to speak all the languages. And I was like, oh my God, that would be wonderful. You'd be able to communicate with anybody, anywhere. So I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna steal that one.
Yes, we had that one in our room too.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Let me see if you're done. Give it 1 more minute, then I'm going to close all the rooms and bring everybody back. And we will get started. It looks like folks are starting to come back now. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. Hopefully you got to learn about some new organizations and, hopefully you got to learn about some new organizations and find out about some interesting superpowers.